Hi, YouTube. So I just wanted to talk about FI and FE a little bit. I'm going to start with how Carl Jung described them in psychological types, which I've just kind of been skimming through, really. But so, all of the introverted functions are directed towards the subject, which is why they're introverted. They're inwards. You're the subject. And extroverted functions are directed outwards towards the object, away from you. So extroverted, right? So, but those are the basic differences to introverted and extroverted feelings. But in terms of the feeling functions, introverted feeling and extroverted feeling, they're judging functions, which we use to make decisions on, basically. So as an INFP, I make my decisions generally using an introverted feeling, which is an introverted subjective value system, right? I create this system. It's mine alone. And that's how I kind of maneuver through the world and figure out, who I am and what I want to do and yada, yada, yada. So the thing with, people always like to talk about FE or describe FE as being about group harmony and FI as being, internal harmony. And I think although that's true, I don't know why people always neglect to talk about how FI and FE often come to the exact same conclusions, because I think that's really important. Sometimes I think when FI users, generally dominant users, but any of them, when they're younger and more emotionally mature, I think they can be the stereotypical like stick in the mud, like just constantly going against the grain. Always trying to do their own thing, always trying to stand out. But I think as people mature, I think FI is coming a lot of the time to the same conclusions as FE. It's just that conclusion is concluded on with a really long, like I call it the scenic process. Like a very simple example, let's say racism, the general moral consensus in society now, at least here in Canada where I live, is racism is bad, right? And, there are a lot of people who still argue that there is a lot of racism, and I'm not going to get into this, but I'm just saying on the surface, racism is bad, you don't engage in racism. Now, an FE user is going to just look around and see that that is the general consensus, and they're going to accept that value because that's what's in the majority. That's what they see everywhere, right? But an introverted feeler like myself, I'm also going to agree that racism is bad, but the thing is, I'm gonna analyze why it's bad. I am not just accepting it face value as I think an FE user would, and I hope FE users don't find this offensive. I'm not trying to be offensive. I might be a little biased because I am an INFP, and I know myself better than I know FE users. But I just think introverted functions, they take the scenic routes. Introverted judging functions take the scenic routes to conclusions. It's individual. They go through the steps themselves. So it takes longer. They're less willing to go along with the crowd. Like, you have a group of people together and, I think, and they're discussing something, and let's say it's not something everybody has thought of, like a moral issue, right? An ethical issue. The FI user is going to be less likely to quickly just jump on the boat and agree with the majority than an FE user would, because they need to get through the steps themselves. But yeah, despite that, they often come to the exact same conclusions. So I think that's kind of interesting. And TI versus TE, the other judging functions, I think it's the same thing. TI might come to their logical conclusions in like backward ass weird ways to other people, but they're often the exact same conclusions. Not always. Not always. Just as introverted feelers don't always come to the same conclusions as extroverted feelers, but that's the difference of people, right? Not everyone's the same, but in general they come to the same kinds of conclusions. If they're healthy individuals. So yeah, that's a difference, or something about FI and FE that, you know, people don't talk about enough, is they often come to the same conclusions. That being said, because FE is more direct and FI is more analytical when it comes to ethical issues. Whenever there's some kind of revolution in terms of like an ethical issue, you know, like you think like the gay rights movement or anything, I'm pretty damn sure it always started with FI users who had analyzed the issue on their own and realized that there was something wrong, you know, and then they push forward until the revolution has enough momentum till it becomes the majority and they convince people, and then, you know, I'd say the FE users and everyone else would join in, and you created a new ethical standard. Again, I hope that is not offensive to FE users. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not trying to say that they don't think things through, but I'm just saying that is what FI is good at. You know, we are analytical about ethical issues, just like TI is really analytical down to the fine details on factual issues, on logical issues. So in a previous video, I talked a bit about, I was trying to like sort out how empathy worked between the FI and FE, because, you know, back then it always seemed like FE was described as being the empathetic function. You know, it's direct, it reaches out to people and it gathers how they feel and then it empathizes with them. But you know, as an INFP, I've always felt like I was pretty darn empathetic, and not just sympathetic. Like some people say FI users are incapable of being empathetic, but it's actually sympathetic. But I totally disagree. Because I actually feel it, right? And that's empathy, right? When you have the emotion. Now, because it's an introverted function, I think it's creative. It's not that I'm necessarily feeling exactly what the other person is feeling, but I'm using my own past experiences to imagine what they're feeling, and I'm creating those feelings. Whereas I think an FE user is actually directly reaching out and somehow like gathering those feelings and feeling them. Like, so I guess it depends on how you define empathy. You know, I still consider myself to be empathetic, I guess, because I still get the emotion, I still get the feelings. And again, a lot of the times I feel like they're going to be the same, we're coming to the same conclusions, FE and FI users. We're actually both empathizing in the correct way with, you know, whoever is outside of us. But we're doing it in different ways. You know, I'm creating those emotions in myself, and the FE is just absorbing them. Yeah, so I guess quickly here, I want to do a larger video on this, but I'll touch on like the bane of introverted functions, because it's taking the scenic route, and because it's creating emotional states and that kind of thing. There is the opportunity for being wrong, I think, more often than the people who use extroverted feeling, extroverted judging functions, because you're basing it on your own experience. I'm basing how I'm assuming the other person is feeling in terms of the empathy situation. I'm basing how I think they're feeling on how I've felt in the past. And if I'm completely different than that other person who I'm trying to empathize with, I am going to get it all wrong, because I just don't have the proper experience to fill in the right pieces, you know? And same goes for, you know, creating, going along with, you know, the harmony of others on ethical issues. If I don't have the correct experiences on my own, like let's say if I just live under a rock, I'm probably going to come to the wrong conclusion, as in, like, it's kind of hard to say, like, whether any ethical conclusion is wrong or right, but I can come to one that is just, let's say it's unrealistic, it's not beneficial to anybody, but to me it seems like the right one, and that's because I'm basing it entirely on my own experiences, on my own self as a person, and if I'm limited and I don't have enough information, it can't stand up to an extroverted judgment. It can't stand up to the extroverted function, because, you know, they have more, they're gathering more experience, they're looking outwards. So bane of FI right there. I want to do another video, just I think all introverted functions have this issue. But I'm going to end this video here because it's at 10 minutes. So, okay, thanks for listening.